All right, Congressman Tim Griffin, District 2. We just got a pair of headphones. Now he's visiting our news booth now. Okay, here he comes now.
He's popular around here.
Yeah, he is popular here. You know why he's popular? He makes himself available to the press.
Wear myself out too, man.
It's
I'm
great
about to pass out.
Okay, well,
it's hot out there today.
Pull that mic up.
Well, I'm not hot. I'm just out of energy.
You're out of energy.
Here we go.
All right. First question. Let's see here.
Ask away.
All right. First question for you. The president's health care legislation that he passed. No, it's not Obamacare. It's got a long name to it.
The Affordable Care Act.
Yes, the Affordable Care Act has made its way to the Supreme Court. Your thoughts on it?
You know, I think that, first of all, I am optimistic that the individual mandate will be declared unconstitutional. This will, my understanding is, it looks like it'll come up next summer. That would be in the summer term, and it would be obviously in the middle of the presidential election. Without testing my memory of what I learned in law school, you know, this whole expansion of the Commerce Clause started decades ago with a case, I think Wickard v. Filburn, basically. And the court has, over the years, allowed the federal government, Congress, to expand and expand and expand their power under that until, and if somebody's listening, they might correct me here, but I think a 1995 Lopez decision was a case where Congress passed a law prohibiting guns on school grounds.
Using the Commerce Clause. I've talked about this.
Using the Commerce Clause. And the court, I think Scalia wrote the opinion, but I have to go back and look. But the majority of the court basically said, look, we don't disagree with the substance of the law, basically, that there shouldn't be guns at schools or whatever. They didn't get into that. That wasn't the issue. The issue is it constitutional? And they said, you know, you can't, this is not a constitutional basis for this law. And that was the first in a long time, first decision in a long time where the court said, you know, it's sort of going too far. And we're going to pull back a little bit. And so I think that was sort of laying down a marker. And I think the court is ready to sort of say, this is also too far. And just from a common sense perspective, it seems to me, all you got to ask is, did the founders really intend, does the Constitution really mean that the federal government can basically make you do anything? And I think the answer to that is clearly no. And if the answer to that is no, then, you know, you got to start pulling back a little bit. So, yeah, that's a long answer to a short question, but I think I'm optimistic about what's going to happen on this. And I tell you what, I voted to repeal the act, not because I don't believe in health care reform. I do, but I believe in a different kind of health care reform. And we got a lot better shot with the court doing what they're going to do than getting anything passed through the Senate and getting the president to sign it before the next election.
Now, with that in mind, Scott and I went to the Florida CPAC, and we broadcast live there last Friday. Mm-hmm. And Michelle Bachmann and several other people spoke there. And one of the things that they made a point of talking about is that, you know, Romney and Perry, and even Paul, to a certain extent, have said that, you know, the president can be elected, he can go in and just give waivers and sign an executive order and it goes away. But that's not the way it's going to work. I mean, there's tentacles all through the law now, correct?
Right. Well, I think, just to be fair, and I'm not advocating for any candidate over another, but just to be fair, I heard Romney's response on that. He's made that response at several debates. To be fair, I think what he's saying is, on my first day, before we have time to pass legislation through the House, pass legislation through the Senate, get it to my desk, all that, we will do all of that. But the first day, I can grant waivers, which would eviscerate the law and kill the law as it currently stands. Because if everybody gets a waiver, there's no law, really. I think that's the point he was making. So I think Bachman's trying to score a political point there, but I think everybody on the stage plans to take an active and forward-leaning role in repealing the health care that passed and taking some of the elements of it, very, very few, putting them in a package with more market-based reform, competition across state lines, innovative pooling, tort reform, medical liability reform, which the president, by the way, has said he's for. He said that in the State of the Union this year. Taking all of that and replacing what we got with that. So I think we'll get there one way or the other if we have fundamental reform at the ballot box in November.
What's your and David, I'll let you jump in here in a second. Let me just ask this question here because it's a local issue that's going on, and I'm sure you're aware of it, Congressman, about the health care exchanges that are supposed to be set up, and the governor has asked the Republicans to get on board and agree to this $3.5 million grant, and they said no. We don't have to worry about it. What's your thoughts on that? Their thoughts are it might get defeated in the Supreme Court. We don't know what's going to happen. Let's don't start putting a whole lot of solid things into play if we don't have to. Well,
I have not been in the details of that, but I'll just take a top line approach to it. I think that I am praying, I am hopeful that the whole thing, as we know it, will be gone. I have heard from both sides on this issue, not because they're trying to convince me. This is not something I'll have a direct role in, but I've just heard. I've just talked with some of the Republican legislators, and I've talked with people that are closer to the governor's view on that. I think that I certainly hope that in the end we never have to implement Obamacare. My understanding is, to the extent this is the federal government funding some of this, I don't have a biggest problem with it as if or compared to if we were funding it here. But I think my position would be, I think this is an additional reason why we need expedited review by the Supreme Court on this, because this is an example. Now that I think about it, it's a good little additional point here. This is an example. This is government, but this is an example of the type of uncertainty that small businesses and big businesses around the country are having to deal with. They can't make substantive decisions about what they're going to do with their money because they don't know what's going to happen with the law, number one. They don't know what the substance of the regulations are going to be because they're not all written yet. We're still waiting to find out what's in the bill after it got passed. And this is when people talk about uncertainty and the reason they're not investing or the reason they're not creating jobs in the private sector is uncertainty. This is an example of that uncertainty. I've had companies here in Central Arkansas tell me that when healthcare law is fully implemented, they may in fact have to spend an additional $500,000 or $1 million or $1.5 million or whatever. And here's the deal: they've got that money sitting aside in an account. If they weren't spending it on implementation of Obamacare or Affordable Care Act, you know what? They might be adding that new wing to the factory or whatever. But instead, they're like, well, can I take that $1 million and invest it? Should I do that? Because I might need that. Because I might have a health care bill. So that's just one example of the uncertainty. But that is the type of thing I hear about all the time. And the fact that we don't know functionally as a government here in Arkansas whether this thing is coming or going is a problem. And it's just a perfect example of the type of uncertainty that the private sector is seeing. I'll dig a little deeper into that issue, although I don't, have a really any role in it. but I'll learn a little bit more about that. But my hope is that it goes away.
All right. Congressman Tim Griffin with us on the Dave Elswick Show. We come back. David Lucas with a question on KARN. Back with you, Dave Elswick Show, KARN. Let's turn it over to my Thursday co-host, David Lucas. I have David in, Tim, so you know, because he works very closely with the housing market, and the housing market is so important to the recovery of this nation. And right now, it ain't happening.
Yeah, I'm in the mortgage banking. But this is actually more a question, Congressman Griffin, about, or maybe more of a comment. You were talking about expedited review, but let's say maybe the court doesn't. We don't know the decision that's going to happen there. But if it does go, I was just going to say, the importance of this next election, especially the dynamics in the Senate. I happened to be last Saturday, Senator Pryor was speaking to a group of doctors, and of course he was in support of it and talking about all the benefits of how this is going to lower cost. And of course, I had some thoughts, of course, that quite the opposite of that. I don't agree with Senator Pryor, but I mean, it's going to take the right people in that are going to get behind it and to reverse this. And that's my concern, is once the wheels are in motion, is the point of no return if the court doesn't strike it down.
The inertia of government.
Exactly. Once it gets its tentacles and grips in. So I guess maybe just talking about, it was more of a comment, I think I was going to say, just the importance of the presidency, and even in the Senate, that there more conservatives are elected.
Well, I didn't hear those specific comments. Obviously, I completely disagree on the issue of Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act. I think that what we have seen is it is pushing employers to drop insurance in many instances. I see the headlines all the time. And it is pushing more and more doctors out of the industry or the education system. Less and less people want to be doctors.
Sure.
Or less and less incentive to be doctors, and a lot of doctors or people wanting to be doctors are looking down the road and they see a world where they're not as interested in practicing, and where the incentives to spending a decade becoming a specialist in neurosurgery or whatever, a lot of those incentives go away. Well, we need people to be doctors. I am very appreciative to healthcare and doctors and the incredible drugs that we have and all that. And I want people to have an incentive to keep doing that. But something you mentioned, Dave, on the exchange issue, you mentioned that some of that money is to go for PR.
Yeah, the $3.5 million grant that the governor wants us to accept, and Ray Bradford, nearly half is to fund a program to educate the public about what the Affordable Health Care Act is going to do for them.
Yeah. Well, clearly that's a waste of money. We don't need to, particularly at this point. This is why we need an expedited review. This is why we need to know as soon as possible. I could tell you, and this is not tongue in cheek. This is true. If the president would hold a press conference tomorrow and declare that he is going to waive and start to work to repeal the health care law, you would see unbelievable sigh of relief by job creators, big and small. I mean, you talking about giving some confidence to job creators and people that hire people and people that will help get us out of this recession. They would love to hear that, because that's just one of the many things hanging over their heads.
Congressman Tim Griffin here on the Dave Elswick Show. For the last couple of moments here with the Congressman, the president's always blaming the Republicans in Congress for holding everything up. I've noticed that he's stopped saying Republicans in the House, because it's really the Democrats in the Senate right now that are holding everything up, right?
Well, I guess it depends on your perspective. All the stuff we have passed a number of bills. Many of them relate to the budget and job creation, energy exploration, and they're just sitting over on the doorstep of the Senate. I said in the paper yesterday that I am frustrated at the pace of things. Well, I'm not frustrated because the president's agenda isn't passing. I'm frustrated that the stuff that we have passed in the House is dead over in the Senate. And, a lot of folks have said, why don't you just pass what the president says? Well, our system is such where we're not a rubber stamp, and I don't believe I was elected in November of 2010 to go to Washington and rubber stamp the president.
I think you were elected for just the opposite.
Right. And to the extent we can find common ground, absolutely. Let's have fundamental tax reform. The president has said he's for it. He says he wants to do that. The Debt Commission said that we ought to do it. Well, let's work toward fundamental tax reform. The president said in the State of the Union he's for medical liability reform and corporate tax reform. Let's do it. We're waiting on him to do it. But, at the end of the day, go along to get along is the recipe for really bad policy. The idea that you're somehow going to just rubber stamp the president so that no one has a disagreement, that's bad policy. What you do is you stand up and you have a vigorous debate of ideas, and where you can find common ground, you agree. And where you can't, well, you keep fighting for your ideas. And it was interesting. The president loves to talk about bipartisanship and working together. He came to the floor of the Congress and said, pass this bill, pass this bill. The bill had never been introduced. He never said, let's find a way to work together on some of this stuff. He just said, pass this bill as it is now. Well, first of all, it's stimulus the sequel. Okay? And that didn't fly the first time. It's not going to fly the second time.
All right. Thank you very much for coming by.
Thank you, sir.
We'll
Appreciate
talk to you again when you come around. Just stop on in. We always got a chair open for you and a microphone. Here is your news on KARN.